I'm recording this from the observation bubble. It's a reinforced acrylic dome bolted to the side of the station, barely big enough for a desk, a chair, and the control console. The inside smells like damp plastic, stale coffee, and a sharp bleach tang of disinfectant I rub into every surface before my shift. Outside, nothing but black water and the sickly halo of the bay floodlights, turning the suspended silt into slow, drifting snow. It's 3:47 a.m. The whole deck and bay below me is quiet. Pumps idle. Jets silent. No ROVs, no tourist subs, no research skiffs clamped into the track. Just an open, submerged tunnel of concrete and steel, lit from inside with cold white strips that make the water glow like a horizontal aquarium. Downrange of the floodlights, right at the edge where they die into pure dark, is a shape. It's just sitting there in the water column, not attached to our rails, not tied to any buoy, an outline, like the shadow of a vessel that forgot to bring its body with it. Rounded nose, fat little conning tower, fins like bent fingers. It's not pinging on our sonar. It's not broadcasting any transponder signal. It's dead black on the screens. But I know it's there, and I know it's waiting. I took this job 3 weeks ago because I was broke and stupid and out of options. You've heard the story 1,000 times. Rent's late, bank account is a joke. My last contract ended when the survey company folded, and I was left with a hard hat, a half-rotten duffel, and a resume that screams, "Will work for food and Wi-Fi." The ad felt like a miracle at 2 in the morning, scrolling job boards with my feet on a plastic chair at the marina bar. Night operator, pelagic decontamination station 3. No prior offshore experience required. Competitive hazard bonus. Must be reliable. Offshore, sure, but close to shore. A glorified pressure washer for boats and subs. Easy money, I thought. I'd sit in a bubble, press buttons, stare at water, and let the machines do all the work. Better than stacking crates, I told myself. Better than going back inland. I've spent my whole life chasing horizons. Lakes, rivers, the coast. I feel wrong if I can't smell brine. My boss, Moran, looks like he was carved out of driftwood and then left out in the sun too long. Permanently hunched, like the whole ocean's been sitting on his shoulders since the 80s. His hands are stained a brownish yellow from biocides and diesel. When he laughs, it sounds like a bilge pump sucking air. He met me at the dock on my first night, gave me a harness that smelled like old sweat and mold, and clipped us both onto the gangway line. Wind was up, the slab of concrete that is Station 3 rising and dropping with the swell like something trying to breathe under the waves. "Come on, kid," he wheezed. "Let's show you where you're going to get bored to death." Inside, it's all painted steel and condensation. The deck and station is basically a floating garage anchored just outside the harbor mouth, where everything that goes in and out is supposed to pass through and get blasted clean. Hulls, ROV frames, little tourist subs, the occasional Coast Guard interceptor. Invasive species, barnacles, oil residue, whatever. The city gets to brag about being the cleanest port in the region, and we get to breathe biocide fumes for shit pay. He walked me through the main corridor, boots clanging on the grating. Pumps hum somewhere below. Every few seconds, something creaked deep in the structure, like a ship grinding its teeth. He pointed through a thick window at the deck and bay itself, a long, flooded tunnel with rails running down the center, like a horizontal dry dock that never bothered drying. High-pressure nozzles ring the walls. Big rotating brush assemblies sit in recesses at intervals, like hairy pillars sleeping in a murk. Simple job, Moran said, that gravelly voice chewing every word. They bring their craft in, clamp onto the track, you run the program. Chemicals and jets do the scrubbing. You stay in the bubble, keep the bay lights on, and make sure no one drowns or blows a pump seal, trying to be clever. Babysitter for boats, basically. He showed me the access ladder up to the observation bubble. It's bolted right above the bay, this weird war of clear plastic and steel. From inside, you can look straight down through the floor grating and see the tunnel, see the rails, see whatever's in there getting scoured. Then he handed me a laminated sheet, edges soft from 100 greasy fingers. Night shift protocols, he said, and for the first time his tone got serious. The joke left his eyes. 11 to 7. You follow these. No exceptions, especially after midnight. The sheet was short, printed in some ancient dot matrix font that made the letters look tired. Night shift protocols. Station 3, 2300 to 0700. 1. Bay floodlights and active sonar must remain on at all times, regardless of marine traffic. Power cost is less than the alternative. 2. Do not, under any circumstances, alter preset biocide and detergent ratios in the decontamination program. Concentrations are precise for a reason. 3. After 0000 hours, the observation bubble hatch is to remain sealed and dogged. Do not open for anyone for any reason. Use intercom and transfer chute only. 4. Prior to each shift, complete full personal decontamination and workspace sanitization. Shower, scrub uniform, boots, and equipment. Wipe down all console surfaces. A clean operator is a safe operator. Be meticulous. I remember smirking at that last part. It sounded like corporate safety bullshit, the kind they print on posters with cartoons. But Moran tapped rule 4 with a fingernail stained the color of old tea. This one, he said, staring at me through narrow eyes. This one's the important one. You keep yourself and this bubble spotless. I mean spotless. Not a flake of paint, not a smear of oil. No algae, no rust stains, nothing that isn't supposed to be there. He leaned in so close I could smell the brine and cheap cigarettes in his beard. A grin tugged at his mouth, but it didn't touch his eyes. Last guy didn't take it seriously. Got careless. Brought in a bit of growth on his cuffs. Bit of slime. Next thing you know, he made a grinding, chewing motion with his jaw and let out that wheezing laugh, clapping me on the shoulder hard enough to rattle my teeth. Brushes in that bay spin fast, kid. Don't want you losing a hand to cleanliness. I didn't get the joke then. How the hell was a smudge of algae on my sleeve, inside a sealed bubble, supposed to connect to brushes spinning 8 meters below the waterline? The logic wasn't just weak, it was non-existent. But I was broke. I needed the job. So I nodded and said, got it. Meticulous, like some obedient idiot. The first couple of weeks were exactly what he promised, mind-numbing. Nights out here have a different kind of quiet than shore. There's still the wind and the slap of waves against concrete, sure, and the groaning of mooring chains. But under it all, there's this constant low thrumming, like the ocean has its own heartbeat. Pumps working, generators humming, the occasional distant thud as something bumps the hull. From a bubble, you get the full symphony. The high whine of the sonar pings, the echo as they come back. The hiss of compressed air whenever a valve cycles somewhere below. The soft glug-glug-glug of water moving through pipes in the walls. And under that, the world outside, the kind of thick silence you only get when you're surrounded by 100 feet of black water. Traffic was steady, but not crazy. Night fishermen bringing in their little trawlers, their hulls rimmed with dead squid and torn nets. Research crews cycling their ROVs through after spending 12 hours crawling along the seafloor, cameras clogged with silt and sea lice. A tourist sub or two from the city, late runs for rich assholes who wanted to see bioluminescent jellyfish through a champagne hangover. We'd clamp them onto the rail, run the program. The system knew which profile to load based on the craft's ID. Short cycle for fiberglass hulls, long for steel, extra detergent for anyone stupid enough to drag a net across a reef. I develop a routine fast. I'd haul myself up to the bubble 15 minutes early, still dripping from the mandatory shower. The station shower is this narrow metal tube where the water always feels slightly colder than it should, no matter how far you crank the valve. Salt in the pipes? Probably. I'd scrub my uniform in the sink, hang it by the heater the shift before, then pull it on still faintly damp. Then I wiped every inch of the bubble clean with industrial wipes until my hands stung. Console, chair, plexi, even a stupid cup holder. It felt ridiculous at first, but the way Moran had looked at me when he talked about Rule 4 stuck in my skull. Being clean was easy. I could be clean. The hours between 2 and 5 are the worst out here. Harbor traffic dies. The last tourist subcycles through around midnight. The research boats go quiet. Even the gulls give up on screaming at the wind. Those hours, it's just you, the hum of the station, and the water pressing on every side. I'd sit with my feet up on the console, headset half off one ear, listening to podcasts or trying to... The voices would blur into the background until I realized I'd listened to the same sentence 10 times without processing it. My eyes would drift to the bay. When the bay is empty, the lights turn it into this glowing tunnel of pale green. You can see particles drifting in the current. Sometimes a fish wanders in and then darts back out, freaked by the brightness. The big brush assemblies sit in their recesses like dormant sea anemones, all bristles and bundled hoses and promise. Sometimes I catch myself staring down there for long stretches, thinking about how thin the metal is between me and all that water. Thinking about pressure, about how fast something can go wrong if a gasket fails. Once or twice, I thought I saw shapes move in the tunnel when it was empty. Just a shadow across the lights. A darker patch in the green. Every time I checked the cameras, there was nothing. Just water and concrete and my own reflection in the monitor. Then last night happened. It started normal. My hands knew the motions. Log on. Check VHF. Confirm bay pressure. Run a test ping. Do the world's saddest dance with a mop across the already clean floor. Around 1, a couple of small fishing boats came through, hulls slick with slime and the crushed neon smear of plankton. By 2:30, it was dead. The city lights were a faint orange smear on the surface far above. Wind had dropped, and the station's groans settled into a long, low sigh. I was halfway through some podcast about a missing yacht when the sonar chirped in my left ear, short, sharp, an automatic contact alert. The console lit up with a new blip at the edge of our local map. I frowned and leaned forward. It was coming from seaward, not the harbor. Slow. Depth matched our bay entry. No ice, no radio call, unregistered traffic. The system tagged it like that helped. I flicked up the external camera feed. For a second, there was nothing but black. Then, between the floodlights, something emerged from the dark. It looked like a small submersible, the kind you'd expect in an old National Geographic documentary. Rounded nose like a whale's head. Tiny sail. Stubby fins. But this thing was wrong even before it got close. It was covered. Not just dirty. Covered. Every surface wore a thick, uneven coat of something dark and heavy. Silt at first glance, but it clung in ropes and slabs, hanging off the hull like decaying meat. Barnacles jutted out in clumps. Strands of weed trailed behind it like black hair. No running lights, no bubbles from thrusters. Yet it moved forward, nose aimed perfectly at the bay entrance, with the steady, unnerving glide of something that's forgotten how to stop. I thumbed the mic patch to the VHF. Unidentified submersible. This is Station 3. You are entering a restricted decontamination zone. Please state your ID and intentions. Silence. The sub, if that's what it was, kept coming. I tried again. Station 3 to approaching vessel. Respond on channel 16, or I'll have to drive you off with the sonic repellers. Technically, we're not supposed to do that without clearance. But the ocean around here is full of idiots in home-built submersibles, and nothing sobers a guy up like a wall of sound hitting him in the spine. Still nothing. The thing just drifted closer until it was hovering directly in front of the bay mouth. 5 meters out, perfectly centered. On my console, one of the Deccan programs armed itself with a quiet chime. Long cycle, heavy organic fouling. Vessel ID. The ID field was just dashes. What the fuck, I muttered. Payment status blinked from red to green. Something had authorized a charge on the system. There was no credit card slot here, no booth. Everything is billed via registered account. But the console didn't care. It had a green light. It was ready. Every instinct I had, every hair on my arms, stood up. This wasn't right. Vessel codes don't just appear from nowhere. Hulls don't move like that without power. Nothing comes in from seaward without calling. That's drilled into every skipper in the harbor. I should have hit the big red abort switch. I should have called Moran, woken his ass up in whatever moldy bunk he sleeps in on shore. Hell, I should have cut power to the bay and pretended there was a fault. Instead, I stared at the blinking green light like an idiot. This job makes you a creature of habit fast. Vessel comes. System bills. Light turns green. You run the cycle. If you don't, you get dragged into meetings about throughput and uptime and service reliability metrics. My thumb hovered over the start cycle switch. The sub hung in the water outside, completely motionless, the floodlights painting its silk-caked skin in harsh white. I thought I saw the dark mass on its hull shift, just a little, like something underneath was flexing. Fuck it, I whispered and pushed the switch. The bay gates cycled open with a heavy clunk. Water flooded in fully, smoothing out the flickers in the lights. The rail clamps slid forward like steel jaws opening for a bite. The sub moved. It didn't surge like a powered hull. It just slid straight and precise into the bay, aligning itself with the central track as if pulled by a magnet. The clamps engaged with a thud that shook the bubble. Indicator lights went from amber to green. The system purred in my ears. Cycle began. The synthetic voice said, cheerful and utterly oblivious. The first thing that hit the sub was the pre-soaked jets. They kicked in from the sides and overhead, hissing through the water, clouds of detergent-laced bubbles blooming around the hull. Chunks started falling off immediately. It wasn't like regular fouling, the way barnacles and weed tear loose in fibrous clumps. This was like someone was stripping plaster. Thick slabs of that dark coating sloughed away in slow motion, tumbling down in ugly, lumpy pieces. They hit the grating and landed in a heap I could see even through the spray, making the water near the floor darker, heavier. Underneath, the hull wasn't metal. At least not any metal I'd ever seen. The exposed surface was a deep, matte black, but not smooth. It looked porous, like stone that had been burned and then frozen mid-melt. It drank the light instead of reflecting it. Lines and ridges ran along it, but not where you'd expect welds or plates. They curved in strange, organic patterns, like someone had carved bones into it and then sanded it flat. I swallowed hard, heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. Probably some weird composite, I told myself. Custom deep-sea shit. Classified. You see weird stuff out here. Then something in a heap of sludge on the sub's back moved. At first, I thought it was just the wash water shifting the pile. But then one segment rose up, slowly, against the current. It stretched taller, thinning as it went, shedding lumps of silt as it revealed itself. A long appendage, no thicker than my arm and easily 3 meters long, uncurled from a muck. It wasn't smooth. It was covered in rows of short, rigid bristles, packed so tight they made the surface look like a giant pipe cleaner. Another followed, then another. The muck peeled away from the central mass like rotten skin, and more of those limbs unfolded. 5 in total, each bristled and flexible, each moving with a steady, deliberate control that made my throat go dry. They didn't sway randomly like kelp. They weren't whipped by the jets. They moved on their own, testing the water, as if sniffing. I realized I was gripping the edge of the console so hard my knuckles ached. My mouth tasted like metal and salt. The sub, if you could still call it that, continued to crawl along the track deeper into the bay. Brushes woke from their recesses ahead, motors whining as they spun up. The big rotating drums turned, their synthetic bristles fanning out in the current, ready to scour. That was when the limbs went to work. They didn't lash out at the brushes, didn't attack the machinery. Instead, One of them extended straight out toward the bay wall, bristles angling just so. It planted itself against the concrete and began to drag. The sound hit me through the bubble and my headset at the same time. Imagine taking 1,000 wire brushes and scrubbing a steel plate with all your strength. Multiply the pitch until it makes your molars vibrate. Then add a grinding undertone, the sound of something older and harder than steel being scraped across it. That's what it sounded like. The limb drew a slow, deliberate line along the wall as the sub crawled past. Wherever it passed, the concrete changed. The dirty gray surface, stained with years of chem scum and microalgae, became pale, almost white. Clean in a way I've never seen concrete be. The line it left behind glowed under the bay lights, a stark strip of new against old. Another limb curled under the hull, bristles flaring as it scoured the rail itself, digging into the grooves where years of grit had built up. I saw bits of metal flake away, sparkling in the water like fish scales. Two more limbs reached forward and began to work on the brush assemblies as they spun, moving against the rotation. They plunged into the tangle of plastic bristles, and for a second I thought they'd get caught, wrapped up, and torn. Instead, they moved like hands, separating and lifting, letting the core of the brush scrub bare metal while their own bristles dug into the root, scraping out the stubborn filth that never comes loose. The fifth limb stayed close to the hull, sliding along that strange black surface in slow, hypnotic strokes. It wasn't cleaning it. It was polishing it, or maybe feeding off whatever the wash had missed. The cycle continued. I don't remember breathing. The rasping, scraping symphony filled the bay and the bubble and, eventually, my skull. Every time, I thought the sound couldn't get any worse. One of the limbs would dig into some new crevice, hitting a different pitch. It was like being inside a dentist's drill scaled up for God. I watched, helpless, as the thing, because that's what it was, I have no better word, systematically cleaned the bay from front to back. It was efficient, methodical. There was no wasted motion. The limbs moved with surgeon precision, always in sync with the sub's crawl, never overlapping work. At one point, one limb paused at a hairline crack in the concrete that ran a few centimeters up from the floor. The bristles fanned out, probing, then dug in. The crack widened, the edge crumbling just enough to shed a fine plume of ancient dust. When the water cleared, the concrete looked newly poured. Seamless. When the final rinse stage hit, the regular jets kicked in again, blasting away loose residue. The limb tips curled in toward the hull, folding like sea anemones recoiling from a touch. As the blower jets, really just huge air nozzles that strip water from surfaces, engaged, the limbs withdrew fully, slipping back into the recess where the muck had been. Only there was no muck anymore. The bay emptied down to operational level. The track nudged the vessel forward. The sub emerged from the far end of the tunnel, into the open water on the harbor side. I stared. The craft was clean, not in the way boats look clean after a scrub, with paint shining and metal glinting. This was different. Its surface drank the light instead of bouncing it. The black hole looked like a chunk of night someone had carved into the shape of a submersible and hung in the water. There were no markings, no number, no flags, no hatch outlines, even, just smooth black. No external thrusters, no prop, no control surfaces I recognized. It backed away from the bay mouth, rotated in place with this eerie, frictionless grace, and then slid sideways into the darkness between our floodlights like someone had flipped a switch. The sonar pinged once, confusion evident even in that dumb machine way, then went quiet. The contact was gone. I don't know how long I sat there staring at where it had been. My hands were shaking. The rasping ghost of that sound still crawled up my teeth. My brain tried to make it mundane. Classified hull cleaning tech. Some new Navy thing. An ROV hitching a ride. Biocidal foam hallucination. Sleep deprivation. The bad coffee I'd chugged at midnight finally punching back. My heart knew better. When my pulse finally stopped trying to punch through my ribs, I did the stupidest thing I could have done. I opened the hatch. Even dog-tight, the bubble sweats. There's always condensation trickling down the inside of the dome. When you step out into the corridor, it's like diving into a colder, wetter version of your own breath. The station smells like wet metal, oil, and that faint moldy edge nothing can wipe away. I climbed down the ladder to the bay control level. The bulkhead doors were still closed, but you can see through reinforced glass panels into the tunnel when the lights are on. I pressed my face to the glass. My skin tried to crawl backwards off my skull. That bay has never been fully clean. It's like a public bathroom. Sure, you hose it down, but there's always grime in the corners, always a little scum on the walls. Now it looked like someone had built a brand new bay, bolted it onto our old station, and not told anyone. The concrete was lighter, almost white. The walls reflected the bay lights in faint, watery streaks. The rails gleamed, every groove distinct and sharp. The big brushes, which always looked a little gray and tired even when they were fresh, were a cartoon of themselves. Bright blue and white and red tufts, plump and perfect. Even the bolts looked different. No rust streaks, no mineral deposits. I wiped a thumb along the inside of the window. No film, no streak, nothing. The smell was wrong too. Normally, when you're close to the bay doors, you get this cocktail of soap, seawater, and something vaguely fishy. Tonight, the air that seeped through the seals felt cold and thin, like being in a hospital storage room. Bleach and ozone and emptiness. I thought about stepping through the manway into the bay proper, just to see, just to touch that impossibly new concrete. Then Moran's voice echoed in my head. Brushes spin fast, kid. My stomach clenched. I backed away from the glass. I retreated to the bubble, sealed the hatch, dogged it so hard my palms hurt, and sat there the rest of the shift with my headset off, every nerve wired, listening to the weight of the ocean press against the station. No more traffic came. At 7, right on time, I heard the distant thump of the dockside hatch cycling. Moran's boots clanged up the corridor. He's got this shuffle to his walk, a little drag on the left foot like he's always half a step behind his own body. He poked his head up through the bubble hatch without asking, which pissed me off more than it should have. He squinted in my face, then out at the bay through the dome. Christ, he muttered, bright in there. He stared for a long time, that permanent frown line between his brows getting deeper. Looks like maintenance came through early, he said finally. Did you log a cleaning crew? I opened my mouth, closed it. The words that wanted to come out felt insane, even in my own skull. Yeah, the demon sub with the wire brush tentacles handled it. Actually, no crew, I said. No one came. Just traffic. He sniffed, rubbed his nose with the back of his wrist. You run cycle for it all? Once, I lied automatically. Heavy foul. Little research boat. Must have stripped a lot of crap. He didn't believe me. Not really, but he also didn't care enough to push. He clambered fully into the bubble, bones cracking in protest, and plopped in the chair with a grunt. Go sleep. You look like shit. I hesitated on the ladder. I started. Moran, these protocols. Rule 4, the cleaning thing. Is that just liability? Or you ever see? I trailed off. His eyes slid to my uniform. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod at my spotless sleeves. My wiped-down boots. You're clean, he said. That's what matters. Go home. The way he said it made my skin prickle. I thought about quitting right then. Just not coming back that night. But rent doesn't give a fuck about haunted subs. In some part of me, the part that had spent too many years on too many docks listening to sailors tell stories, needed to see if it would happen again. If you stop listening to the ocean when it whispers, you miss the warning before it screams. That night, I came back early. I showered longer than usual, used the harsh station soap until my skin felt like sandpaper, scrubbed my uniform until my wrists ached. I even took a stiff brush to the soles of my boots, digging out every little scrap of dried salt and harbor grime. When I climbed up into the bubble, it smelled like sanitizer and damp cloth. I wiped things down anyway, until the cleaning wipes left no mark on the white cloth. I checked the bay on the monitors. Still perfect. The shift started normal enough. Early traffic. A Coast Guard RHIB with paint half flaking from the constant slap of waves. A private research sub, all curves and glossy yellow composite, came in with a couple of grad students giggling nervously inside. I watched them clutching notebooks and coffee mugs through their little viewport as the bay swallowed them and the cycle began. I tried to tell myself that last night had just been a glitch. Lights playing tricks. Some weird algae bloom loosening in sheets. The limbs have been hoses. Shadows. My tired brain stitching nonsense together. Then the little yellow sub came out, gleaming. The kids inside were grinning. They waved at the camera like tourists. One of them had a strip of photos taped along the bulkhead behind his head. Those old school, instant ones. I remember them from when they came in. Bright colors, someone's birthday cake, a dog, a girl making a face at the lens. Now, as the sub rotated for decoupling, the camera angle shifted and the photos caught the lights just right. They looked wrong. I frowned and zoomed the feed. The images were faded, like they'd been sitting in a sunny window for a decade. The edges were curled up. The white border had yellowed. The girl in the picture still smiled, but the color had leached out of her face, leaving her skin a flat, tired gray. The grad kid unhooked, yawning, clearly oblivious. They waved again and motored off into the harbor, leaving a trail of bubbles. I sat there, heart thudding in my throat. Lighting, I told myself, just refraction through the dome. Sheet camera, anything. Half an hour later, a crab boat came in. I recognized it. A rusty little thing that stank of diesel and shellfish in desperation. The skipper, white beard, bright red watch cap, always smirked at the camera when he came through like we were sharing some private joke. He had this stupid little Lucky Charm hanging in his wheelhouse, some faded plush mascot from a sports team, bright blue with a big goofy grin. I'd seen it bouncing over his shoulder every time he dragged his sorry hull in here. When he came out of the bay this time, the charm hung lower, the string thinner. The bright blue had dulled to grayish slate. One of the mascot's button eyes had a crack running through it, filling it with tiny spiderweb fractures. The skipper didn't seem to notice. He scratched at his beard, spat over the side, and motored off into the night. My fingers felt numb on the controls. I started paying attention, really paying attention. A small patrol boat with a brand new Orange Life ring on the aft rail came in. The foam was glossy, the reflective tape crisp. It went through a standard cycle. When it emerged, the ring sat in the same spot, but its surface looked scuffed. The tape had that matte, dulled look reflective stuff gets after years of sun and salt. The rope was just the tiniest bit frayed. A sleek tourist sub with LED strips inside, its cabin slid into the bay with a row of drunk rich kids pressed to the glass, necklaces of glow sticks looped around their necks. When it left, the glow sticks were there, but their colors were flat, dim, like gloopy plastic pulled out of an attic box. Their bracelets looked like sagging rubber bands that had been on too many wrists. The worst one that shift was a private skiff. Little fiberglass thing, pristine, the kind some influencer would buy just to get photos of themselves standing on the bow. Young couple aboard, both in matching white windbreakers, teeth too straight not to be expensive. She had a pot plant on the dash. Not weed, a little succulent in a stupid geometric ceramic pot, bright green with fleshy leaves. I watched them pull in, laughing, arguing about whether to spring for the deep scrub package. I saw the leaves on that plant catch the light, glossy and firm. They authorized a long cycle. They swallowed them. The raspy undercurrent in the machinery sound came back for a moment, faint enough that I could pretend I imagined it. When the skiff came back out, they were still talking, still in their white jackets. But she stopped mid-sentence, frowned, and picked up the pot. Even from the bubble, I could see it clearly. The succulent was brown. Not browning. Brown. Dead. The leaves were shriveled, tips crisp like they'd spent a summer on some sunny windowsill no one remembered to water. The soil pulled away from the sides of the pot in a dry ring. She turned it in her hands, baffled. Said something I couldn't hear. The guy shrugged, smiled. Might have made a joke. She laughed, but it sounded thin even through the glass. They motored off. I stared at the empty bay, my heart ricocheting around my ribs. The rules clicked into a shape they hadn't had before. Rule 4. Clean operator, clean workspace. Be meticulous. Moran's warning. Don't want you bringing growth in here, kid. He wasn't worried about contamination spreading from the bay to us. He was worried about whatever was in the bay, deciding something needed to be cleaned. If something comes through with dirt, with life, with history on it, the cycle could strip more than you want gone. Not just grime, not just organisms. Time. I don't have numbers or gauges for that. Just what I saw. A lifespan of wear, compressed into 15 minutes, applied selectively to anything that didn't meet some invisible standard of clean. I sat there, thinking about my own shit. About the old canvas bracelet I sometimes wore, frayed from years of working boats, that I'd left at home tonight. About the patch of peeling paint on the bubble's inner wall I'd been meaning to report. About the faint mildew stain I'd scrubbed off the console base that afternoon. What would that thing do to a person with a little too much dirty on them? Scrub off your calluses? Your scars? Your age? Your memories? How many layers could it peel before there was nothing useful left? I felt sick. I told myself I quit. I'd make it through the shift, hand the bubble off to Moran, and tell him I was done. Blame vertigo. Or anxiety. Or just admit I didn't want to babysit an Eldridge pressure washer for minimum wage. Around 3, traffic died entirely. Again with that deep quiet. Even the sonar pings sounded hesitant, like they didn't want to disturb whatever was in the water. I turned off the podcast, pulled the headset entirely off, and sat in the semi-dark, the bubble lit only by the monitors. Outside, the floodlights carved a sharp-edged box out of the black. Bits of plankton drifted like dust in an abandoned room. For a while, nothing happened. I almost convinced myself I was being dramatic. I picture myself telling this story in a bar 5 years from now, laughing at how freaked out I'd been by some defective pump noise and a few faded knickknacks. Then, at 3:47, the shape appeared. Not on sonar, not as a blip on the map, just there at the very edge of the floodlight's reach, where the water turns from green to pure black. One moment, it was only open water. The next, there was a darker shadow in the dark. Rounded bow, hunched, bulbous mass behind it. No lights, no vabes. It wasn't in the bay this time. It floated parallel to the station, off to the side, as if it had drifted into watch. My breath hitched. I leaned forward, nose almost touching the plexi of the dome. The sub, that same black, driverless hull. I knew it was the same, even without markings, hung motionless in the water. The floodlight glow barely reached it. What little light touched its skin vanished instantly. It didn't reflect, it consumed. My console stayed blank. No active job, no beating, no cycle armed. The bay was clean. The rails were clean. The brushes gleamed in their nests. So why was it here? Something fluttered at the edge of my hearing. Not a sound in the station. Not the usual hum. It was like an absent sound. The feeling that there should be a noise, bubbles from thrusters, creak of hull. But there was nothing. The silence pressed harder, filling my ears, until I could hear my own pulse as a distant drum. My brain flipped into survival mode. Check the hatch. Check the seals. Check yourself. I tore my gaze away from the shadow. Forced myself to look down into the bubble. Console, gleaming, wiped, not a smear anywhere. Floor swept. The metal grating still damp from my pre-shift mop. No muddy footprints. No flaking roost. The little storage cubby, closed. No luoserax. No oil cans. Nothing. My uniform. I ran my hands down my chest, my sleeves, my thighs. Dark blue shirt, dark blue pants, station logo over the breast. I'd washed them an hour before shift, hung them, checked every inch. Clean. I almost let myself relax. And then I saw it. Just above the top of my left boot, on the cuff of my pant leg, was a stain. Tiny, maybe the size of a thumbnail. Dark reddish brown, sunk into the fabric fibers instead of sitting on top. For a second, my brain refused to recognize it. It was just color, just a shadow. No big deal. Then memory caught up. When I'd gone down to stare through the bay glass after the thing's first visit, I'd stepped too close to the threshold. The floor had been wet, not just with water, but with whatever the wash had blasted loose. I'd felt my left boot skid for half a second on something soft before I caught myself, swore, and stepped back. I meant to clean them. I'd scrubbed the soles, washed the uppers. But that little smear above the boot, where the laces don't quite cover, could have been hiding in a fold. Could have dried into the fabric. Now, under the pale glow of the bubbles overhead strip, it looked too much like the sludge that had fallen off that sub for me to pretend otherwise. My mouth went dry, very slowly, as if sudden movement might draw its attention more. I lifted my eyes back to the dome. The sub hadn't moved. It still hung at the edge of the light, nose pointed in my direction. There were no external sensors I could see, no obvious windows. But I could feel it looking, not at the bay, at me. Understanding slid into place like a piece in one of those stupid puzzles they keep in waiting rooms. Too neat, too obvious, too late. The bay was immaculate. The brushes were new. The rails were gleaming. The station, this bubble, my console, my chair, sterilized within an inch of their lives. I was the only dirty thing left. It wasn't here to clean the bay. It was here for the smudge on my pant leg. It was here for me. I don't move. I don't even breathe for a second, like if my lungs stay, still the rest of me will somehow not count. The sub sits out there in the dark water, just far enough away that the light can't completely peel it out of the black. It's like the floodlights are afraid to touch it. My eyes start to sting, and it takes me a second to realize I haven't blinked. The smear on my pant leg feels hot, like a little coal pressed into the fabric. I force air in my chest, slow, quiet. Think. Rule 3. Hatch sealed after midnight. No exceptions. Rule 4. Be clean. If I open the hatch, I break one rule to obey the other. If I sit here, I obey one and wait to see what it does about the other. The sub doesn't move. The water around it is so still it might as well be painted on the glass. No current lines. No stray fish. Even the trickle of silt seems to have stopped. It's like the whole ocean is holding its breath with me. Okay. I swallow, reach down, and pinch the cuff of my pant leg away from my skin, careful not to smear the stain any higher. My fingers tremble. It's just fabric, just a bit of dried something. I grab a disinfectant wipe from the canister by the console. My hands are shaking so bad the plastic rattles. The smell of harsh citrus and alcohol hits me, familiar and stupidly comforting. Come on, I whisper. Don't even know if I'm talking to myself or the stain. Come on. I fold the wipe over my fingers and dab at the smear. The wipe comes away dark. Not soaked, just shadowed. Like whatever's in the fabric is bleeding into it. I check the cuff. The smear is still there. If anything, it looks sharper. Edges cleaner. Before, it was a vague blot. Now it's become a distinct little crescent, a nearly perfect curve of brown-red. My heart gives a single hard thud. I try again, pressing harder. The cloth squeaks against the fabric, the way it does on the console when it's already clean and I'm just moving chemicals over nothing. I grind the wipe in until my fingers hurt. When I pull it back this time, the wipe is still white. The smear on my pants has gone glossy, like it's wet again. Outside, in the water, something shifts. Not much, just enough that the light along the sub's hull bends in a new line, like it rolled an inch closer. A cold line of sweat slips down my spine under my shirt. Fuck, I whisper. My hand goes for the radio before my brain finishes the thought. I mash the transmit button hard enough to make the plastic creak. Station 3 to shore. I say, voice too high. I clear my throat. Try again. Moran, you awake? Static hisses in my ear. The little green transmit LED blinks. For a second, I think maybe the cable's loose, or the storm last week finally killed the antenna. Then his voice oozes through the fuzz, rough with sleep and cigarettes. Station 3, what's your emergency? The phrase is automatic drilled. He doesn't sound surprised. He sounds tired. I swallow and glance out at the sub again. Still there. Still waiting. My mouth is dry as old rope. We got a problem on the night shift. Power, he asks. Pressure? You've entered something you shouldn't. No, I bite the word off before I say haunted. It's that thing. The maintenance vessel. Silence. Not static. Not a click. Just him breathing on the other end. You ran a cycle for it, he says finally. Not a question. Last night, I say. It cleaned the bay. All of it. You saw. Another pause. I hear the creak of his chair like he just sat up. And now, he asks. It's back. But it's not in the bay. It's off the side in the water. I stare at the shadow. It stares back. Just watching. You sure it's the same one? The question is stupid. It's like asking if there are two suns. I can see the burned-in black of that hull in my sleep already. Yeah, I say. It's the same. He exhales a long, slow rasp. What's your status? He asks. Any anomalies in the bay? Pumps. Everything reads normal. I say. Sonar is not even picking it up. It's just there. And you, he presses. You're in the bubble. You're sealed. I look down at my leg. The smear gleams like a little eye. I'm in the bubble, I say carefully. Hatch-dogged. Systems are fine. But, he says, I hesitate. Something in his tone has changed. It's not just gruff annoyance at being woken. There's a tightness there, coiled under the words. I hear again how he said, you're clean. That's what matters. There's a spot, I say, on my pant leg. Left boot. Must have picked something up when I went down to look at the bay last night. Growth? He asks quietly. I don't know. Just a stain. I can't scrub it out. Another long exhale. When he speaks again, his voice has dropped half an octave. Listen to me, and don't interrupt, he says. My fingers tighten on the radio. Okay, you keep that hatch sealed, he says. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see on the cameras, you do not open for a vessel. You do not open if you hear me yelling outside. You do not open even if the bay floods completely and the manuals say you have to access the valves. You stay in that bubble. Yeah, I say, forcing a laugh that sounds like I'm choking. Trust me, I wasn't planning on taking a swim. I'm not joking. Kid, there's no wheeze in his voice now. Just flat steel. You open that hatch, you stop being an operator, and you start being part of the station. Do you understand? I swallow. He knows. Of course he knows. Those rules didn't come out of nowhere. You've seen it before, I say. He doesn't answer right away. Outside, a faint scrape whispers through the hull. Not the big, building, shuddering grind of a container ship passing too close. This is higher, finer, like a file on bone. I flinch anyway. Moran hears it too. I can tell by the way his breath hitches. Station 3 is old, he says finally. Older than you. Older than me, the way we use it now. Before it was a deck and bay, it was a listening post. Cold War. They ripped out most of the classified hardware when they decommissioned it. Most, not all. I glance at the sonar display. It still shows empty water. What does that have to do with? Back when they were tracking anything with a prop, the Navy ran experiments. He talks over me. Biofilm control. Hull maintenance. Something to help their toys stay cleaned down deep for a long time. They stopped, or they said they did. But this station never got fully shut down. Just repurposed. New coat of paint. New contracts. Old ghosts. Scrape. This time it's under my feet. The metal deck vibrates, a fine tremor I feel in my fillings. I lick my lips. And the sub? I ask. That thing in the bay? Wasn't in any of the paperwork, he says dryly. I took this job 20 years ago. Back then, the bay was already cleaner than any other port I'd seen. I thought it was the chemicals. Thought it was clever design. Then one night, operator before you ran a cycle on an unregistered vessel. Same as you. Same black hull. Same behavior. They look brand new after. What happened to him? I ask, though I already know the shape of the answer. Moran doesn't sugarcoat it. He came off shift looking like he hadn't slept in a year, he says. I figured he'd just had a scare. Green kid. Next night, he calls me on the radio, voice shaking, says there's a smudge on his sleeve and something outside. By the time the day crew came out to swap, the bubble was empty. My stomach drops. Empty. I echo. Chair was there, he says. Headset. His uniform shirt folded on the console. Pants in a neat little heap by the hatch. No sign of him. No water. No breach. Cameras all glitched from 0300 to 0500, like someone rubbed a magnet over the drives. And you didn't call the Coast Guard? The cops. It comes out more accusation than question. He sighs. Official story is he walked, he says. Quit and swam for shore. We're a kilometer out. He'd have died of hypothermia halfway. But paper likes a simple box. You keep the box simple, you keep your contract. You start talking about things that clean concrete down to the decade. You lose more than your job. Anger flares up under the fear, hot and useless. So you knew, I say, and you still hired me. Still gave me the same bullshit speech about keeping clean like it was a joke. It's not a joke, Moran snaps. There's that rasping laugh again, but there's no humor in it. It's the only thing that keeps this place from becoming a fucking monument. You want them to shutter the station? Fine. They'll move decking closer inland. Stick it right in the harbor. Let whatever this is crawl around the pilings where kids swim in summer. You think it prefers steel to flesh? It prefers dirt, grime, time. We're the dirtiest things afloat. Scrape. This time it's above me. I look up. The ceiling of the bubble is just curved acrylic and steel ribs. Condensation runs in tiny beads along the interior, making little rivers that merge and drip. Right now, those beads are trembling in place, vibrating with the sound. They quiver along the arc like they're trying to decide which way gravity is. My skin crawls. So what do? I ask. I've already got something on me. It knows. It's here. On the other end, I hear him light a cigarette. The flick of the lighter is loud in the quiet. You compartmentalize, he says. You contain. You don't let it touch anything it doesn't already have a claim on. That's not an answer. That's all there is, he says. If you can get rid of whatever you're carrying without spreading it, do it. If you can't, he trails off. I imagine him staring out at the harbor, smoke curling around his head, thinking about paperwork and body counts. If I can't, I push. If you can't, you make sure it doesn't leave with you, he says. A deadline would have been kinder. I slam the handset back into the cradle before I say something that'll get me fired before I get cleaned off the face of the earth. The scrape comes again, a long, drawn-out note that makes the bubble creak in its mounting. I look out through the dome. The sub has moved closer. It's not subtle about it now. It slid right up to the side of the station, a meter off the concrete flank, just below the bubble. Maybe 15 meters away from me, if you draw a line from my nose through the glass to that black hole. Up close, it's worse. There are lines on its surface, faint ridges like someone carved channels into obsidian. They curve and interweave in patterns I can't quite follow, like currents on a chart that loops back on itself. I don't see limbs. Not like in a bay, but the dark along its back looks thicker, like something is pressed tight to the hole, just under the skin. I pull my feet up off the floor and tuck them onto the chair, stupid instinct like not letting your toes hang off the end of the bed so the thing underneath can't grab you. The smear on my cuff is a tiny sickle of color against the blue fabric. Containment. Get rid of it without spreading it. I yank at the cuff, pulling my pant leg up my calf as far as it'll go. The stain is small, but I don't trust myself not to smear it while I'm fighting the fabric. I unbuckle my boot with fingers that don't feel like they belong to me. The laces are stiff with salt. Of course, they choose now to snag. Come on, I mutter. The stitching gives with a little pop. The boot comes off. My sock is damp and cold against the grid floor. I force myself to breathe slow, intentional breaths. If I hyperventilate, I'll pass out, and then none of this matters. I catch the seam of my pant leg at mid-calf and yank hard. The sound of tearing fabric is loud in the bubble. The pants were cheap. The seam gives way in a ragged line. I haul the lower half of the leg off, careful, so careful, not to let the stained cuff brush my skin. It flutters like a dead thing in my hand. Outside, the sub drifts a little closer like a shark catching scent. I look at the transfer chute. It's built into the console like a bank deposit box. Small hatch, double sealed. We send down test swabs, sample bottles, the occasional forgotten wrench to the level below. It vents into a tiny compartment just off the bay where a tech can pick things up without opening anything to open water. In theory, you're not supposed to put anything contaminated in there. In theory, the whole station isn't built over an underwater thing that eats time. I set the torn pant leg in my lap and tap the chute keypad. The indicator light blinks amber, then green. Inner door unlocked. The panel says in that same idiot cheerful synthetic voice as the wash system. My hand doesn't want to move. It knows on some dumb animal level that sending part of myself down there is a surrender. Containment, I tell it. Not surrender. Offer the dirt. Keep the rest. Outside, the whole scrape pauses like it's listening. I grip my teeth, grab the pant leg by a clean section, and stuff the stained half into the chute. The metal interior is cold on my knuckles. The smear leaves a faint dark trace on the steel lip. I grimace and shove it all the way in. When I pull my hand back, I can't help checking my fingers for color. They're pale, shaking. Novedon. Inner door sealed. The panel chirps as the little hatch slides shut. Ready for transfer. I hit the transfer button. There's a muted chunk as the pressure equalizes. I imagine the little package of fabric sliding along the tube, down through the wall, into the waiting compartment by the bay. For a second, nothing happens. Then the sub moves. It peels away from the station in a smooth, greedy curve, gliding toward the side where the bay sits like a slot in the structure. I can see just the faintest hint of movement along its back, like hackles rising. The raspy scrape returns, louder now, vibrating up through the floor as it passes along the outside of the bay wall. My choice is suddenly very, very real. If this doesn't work, I've essentially pointed it straight at the heart of the station. If I misread its rules, I've just fed it a path. I switch the monitor feed to the bay side camera. The little square of the transfer compartment shows up in one corner. It's just a box, bare metal, a hatch on one side that leads to the main bay level. On the floor of the box is the torn pant leg, folded over on itself, the stained cuff visible. The security cam image flickers, once like old VHS tape. Something dark passes across it. At first, I think it's just a shadow from the sub moving outside. But shadows don't move that way. They don't have edges that bend around corners like fingers. The feed glitches. Lines roll. For a heartbeat, the picture is nothing but static. When it clears, the compartment is immaculate. No pant leg. No stan. The metal looks new. Even the scuff marks I remember on the far wall from some tech dropping a cylinder are gone. I flip to a different camera, one that looks along the exterior of the bay. I catch just a glimpse of a bristled limb withdrawing through the concrete like it's water, leaving behind a track of paler, cleaner stone. The sub hangs a few meters out, limbs tucked, as if it's tasting what it just got. I stare at the empty compartment, at the clean walls. My breath comes in a shaky rush of relief that tastes like rust. Maybe that's it. Maybe that was all it wanted. Remove the contamination and the vessel goes wherever it goes. Down into some trench to nap for another decade. I look up. The sub hasn't moved away. If anything, it's closer again. I actually laugh. A dry, humorless sound. Of course, I say. Of fucking course. I know why before I even look down. The cuff is gone. The fabric is gone. But my leg isn't bare. Where the cuff had wrapped my skin, just above my ankle, there's a faint reddish arc. Not blood. Not a rug burn. It's a rash. A perfect little crescent of irritated flesh matching the exact curve of the stain that had been on the fabric. The skin there is hot and tight. When I touch it, it stings. I jerk my hand away, heart hammering. It wasn't just on a cloth. Whatever I brought up from the bay, I brought into my skin. Outside, the sub glides upward until its black bulk is level with the bubble. It stops, nose angled slightly upward as if sniffing. If there were eyes on that smooth hull, they'd be looking right at me. I suddenly feel very, very naked. The scrape starts again, but this time it's not the long drag along flat hull. It's staccato, little scritch, scritch, scritch sounds circling the bubble's base, like something is testing seams. The condensation on the inside of the dome shakes free in a tiny rain. Droplets patter on the console, the floor, my hair. One droplet doesn't fall like the others. It clings to the dome for a moment, then starts sliding sideways. Not down, not along gravity's line. Sideways. It curves along the interior of the acrylic, leaving a thin, dry trail in its wake, like it's scraping as it goes. My throat closes. Tiny bristles. The big limbs are for the bay, for hulls and rails, for concrete. The fine work, the detail can ride in water. There's moisture everywhere in here. On the glass, in the air, in my lungs. My skin suddenly feels too small. The radio crackles. "You still with me?" Moran's voice asks, strained. "Yeah," I say. My voice sounds like it's coming from someone else's throat. It took the fabric. It cleaned the compartment. But it's not leaving. He grunts. "How bad's the mark on you?" I look at the red arc again. "Small," I say, right above my ankle. "Looks like the edges of a chemical burn." "Any others?" he asks. "Check. Be thorough." I run my hands over my arms, my neck, my other leg. My fingers catch on old scars. Rope burn on my right palm from a line that ran out too fast. A white streak along my forearm where a knife slipped filleting fish. They feel normal. No estine, no heat. Just that one place on my ankle, prickling like a circle of angry ants. "Just the one," I say. He's quiet for a second. "Then you might have a shot," he says. "It's particular. It goes for the worst of it first. If you can keep it focused there, if you don't panic and smear, it might clean just that and be done." "Clean just that," I repeat. What does that even mean when it's flesh? He doesn't answer. On the exterior camera, one tiny line appears along the bubble's mounting bracket, bright and fresh where the rust used to be. The camera feed stutters. I see, for a heartbeat, my own reflection in the dome. I look wrong. It's not anything dramatic. No sudden wrinkles, no hair gone white. But my face is slightly off. The dark circles under my eyes, earned over too many graveyard shifts, look deeper, older. The little spot on my jaw from when I nicked myself shaving last week is gone entirely. The skin there pale and new. It's not just age. It's arbitrary. The droplet inside continues its sideways crawl. It reaches the base of the dome and stops just above the metal rim. Then it falls straight down. Not the way the others did, random little splats. It drops like it was aiming. It lands on the deck grid an inch from my bare toes. Where it hits, there's a faint sound. Not a splash. Not the quiet metal ping of water. A scrape. The droplet spreads out in a tiny circle, then contracts, leaving behind a pinpoint of bright, fresh steel no bigger than a pinhead. I jerk my feet up onto the chair, curling them under me like a kid. "Fuck this," I whisper. "Fuck this, fuck this, fuck this." The droplet, no bigger than my fingernail now, trembles. Another bead of condensation detaches from the dome, joins it. The circle grows. On the camera, more bright arcs appear along the bubble's mouths. The seals, I say, realization punching through the panic. It's cleaning the seals. "Yeah," Moran says. His voice is far away now. Not because of distance, but because of the way my blood is roaring in my ears. It wants in, or it wants you out. Either way, same result. I press my back against the curved glass, as if I can somehow put my mass between the crawling thing and the rest of the bubble. There's got to be something I can do. Only thing you can do is decide, he says. You try to fight it, scramble around, it'll spread. Those little bristles will get everywhere. In you, in the electronics, in the ducts. You sit still and let it take what it's already marked. You might walk away with less. Less. Less what? Less skin? Less leg? Less years? I stare at the red crescent on my ankle, at the droplet on the floor growing and leaving a ring of clean around itself. It dawns on me, stupidly late, that Moran never said the previous operator died. He said the bubble was empty, clothes folded, no body. What if clean doesn't look like a corpse? What if it looks like nothing at all? The sub shifts outside the window. It's pressing closer until I can see faint texture on that impossible black hole. My sonar still shows blank ocean, but the dome hums with its presence. I think about jumping, about undogging the hatch, swinging it open, and throwing myself out into the corridor, bare feet slapping on wet metal, sprinting for the dock cable and the little tender tied up topside. The cold shock of sea on my skin, the desperate burn in my chest as I swim for the orange smear of city lights on the horizon. The thing would follow, not because I'm special, because I'd be a dirty streak in an otherwise clean structure, cutting a path for it to trace. I'm not just a man in a station anymore. I'm a stain on the edge of its work. Hey, Moran says in my ear. His voice is softer than I've ever heard it. Kid, yeah, I whisper. You're recording this, right? I glance at the little red light on the console. The station logs audio and video from the bubble as a matter of course. As since before I worked here. Yeah, I say. Good, he says. That's something. Even if it scrubs the drives, there's a chance something sticks. Noise. Artifact. Pattern. Next time, maybe someone smarter than us will know more when they get to your part. My throat tightens. Next time, I echo. You think this is a one-off? He gives that wheeze laugh again. We're barnacles on this thing's hull. It moves slow and it moves deep, but it moves. Every so often, it needs to clean whatever's grown on it. Sometimes that's just concrete and rubber. Sometimes it's us. The droplet reaches the foot of my chair. The metal there brightens around it, old scuffs smoothing out like they're being erased from time. The chair leg looks like it did the day some poor tech unboxed it and bolted it down. The bite mark in the plastic armrest from where I once pressed a screwdriver into it, bored out of my mind, fades until the surface is smooth. It's starting to eat my history. I press my palms together so hard my fingers hurt. I don't want to die, I hear myself say. It sounds childish. Useless. Don't think of it like that, Moran says. Think of it as losing the parts that don't fit the standard. That's what cleaning is. Stripping away what doesn't belong. Easy for you to say, I snap. You're not the one with a fucking rust god outside your window. I've had 20 years with it in my peripheral vision, he says quietly. I see it in every spotless bolt on that bay. I see it every time a hull comes out looking like it's been in dry dock for a decade. I see it every time I hire someone new and hope they're more careful than the last. So why not shut it down? I demand, blow the place. Sink it, concrete the whole thing in, and let it rust. Silence. One, he says after a moment, because no one pays to blow up a functioning Deccan station. Two, because we don't know what happens if you trap it. You really want to be the guy who puts a lid on something that crawls through holes in concrete? Maybe it finds another way up. Divert it out here, we control where it feeds. Or we pretend we do. You seal it, it might decide to clean somewhere else. Somewhere with fewer protocols. The logic is fucked. It's also the only logic we have. The droplet stops at the nearest grid square to my ankle. It trembles, then rises up slightly like a little dome trying to see. I can feel the heat of my rash through the air. I realize, suddenly, that I'm crying. Silent, stupid tears tracking salt down my cheeks. The ocean outside, another ocean inside, and not a damn bit of difference between what either one cares about. I wipe my face with the back of my wrist, angry at myself for wasting moisture where something can use it. What happens, I ask, voice barely more than breath, if I let it? Moran doesn't pretend not to understand. It'll take what it's marked, he says. At least, maybe more. It'll strip away everything about you it considers contaminant. I don't know how it decides. Maybe it's just whatever touches that rash. Maybe it's everything connected to it. What does connected mean? I whisper. Blood? Nerves? Time? Yeah, he says, useless word covering all of it. The sub outside drifts even closer. I can feel, more than see, something unfurling from its back. There's a new sound now. Beneath the scrape, beneath the hum, a faint, steady ticking. Not like a clock, like bristles chattering against steel in tiny, precise strokes. The droplet on the floor quivers again and then leaps. Not high, not dramatic, just enough to bridge the gap between metal and skin. It lands on the reddened crescent above my ankle. For an instant, it's cold. Shockingly, piercingly cold, like someone pressed an ice cube into burned flesh. Then the cold drops away. It doesn't become heat. It becomes absence. I can feel the shape of the contact. A ring, tiny at first, then widening as the moisture spreads. Wherever it touches, sensation disappears. Not numb, exactly. Not like when your foot falls asleep. Those come with pins and needles. Static. This is just nothing. The ring widens. The red of my skin pales, then vanishes. The little freckle I've had above that ankle since I was 8 fades like someone lowering the opacity. The faint white scar from when a crab caught me as a kid blurs to nothing. My leg doesn't look cleaned. It looks like it never existed in those places. I can still move my foot. I flex my toes, watch the tendons jump. But the patch of skin where the droplet rests might as well be someone else's limb. On the console, the camera feeds glitch again. For a half second, every view shows the bay from 20 years ago. I know it's 20 because the date stamp flickers with it. A younger font, a different timestamp. The paint is different. The rails lack some of the hardware we have now. Then the feed snaps back. It's doing it to the station and to me at the same time. Scrubbing layers. The droplet contracts, darkens, then gleams. Tiny bristles catch the light, too small to see until the angle is just right. It begins to move along the curve of my leg. Slow, meticulous. I want to kick. I want to stomp my heel down and smear it into the metal. Grind it out. But I've seen what happens when it spreads across surfaces. It doesn't leave mess. It leaves absence. I grit my teeth until my jaw pops. Talk to me, I say into the radio, voice shaking. Say something, anything. Moran clears his throat. You ever been down on a real deep dive? He asks. Past recreational. Past the point where your head feels like it's full of other people's thoughts and your teeth start to itch. No, I say. The word hisses out between clenched molars. The droplet tumor moves a few millimeters higher, leaving behind a band of perfectly featureless skin. I've done 40 meters on air, that's it. I did one once, he says, back before this. Military contract. We went down on a wall nobody had mapped proper. There was a ledge down there that looked wrong, cleaner than anything around it. Rock face smooth like glass. No coral, no algae, like something had taken a strip of sandpaper to the reef. I put my hand on it, just to see. The thing on my leg inches higher. I can see hairs disappearing ahead of it, vanishing like they never grew. Goosebumps rush in its wake, confused nerves trying to feel something that's gone. What happened? I asked. When I came back up, the calluses on that palm were gone, he says. Scars too. Fingerprint was different. They had to redo my clearance prints. Also realized I couldn't remember the name of my first boat. Everything else. My first dog, my first job, the girl I almost married, all there. But that boat, that piece, gone. Like it had never existed. Whole chunk of my life story just scrubbed. The thing is halfway on my shin now. The skin behind it looks like newborn flesh. No hair, no marks, not even the faint variations in tone you get from just being alive and moving around in the world. And you stayed, I say. I can't keep the disbelief out. Yeah, he says. I stayed. I figured, Maybe losing some pieces is the cost of doing business. Someone's got to sit in that bubble. Better me, who knows where not to step, than some kid. I let out a breath that's half laugh, half sob. Great pep talk, I say. He snorts. You want honesty or fairy tales? He asks. Outside, through the distortion of the dome, I see something reach from the sub toward the station. Not the massive limb from last night, but a thinner tendril. It brushes along the seam where bubble meets hull. A bright ring appears, circling the base. The bolts holding the bubble in place shine like stars. The metal between them darkens. You don't have to be an engineer to guess what happens when you remove material around connecting points. The droplet on my leg splits. Half of it keeps moving up, still tracking the line of the original rash. The other half oozes sideways, chasing the little veins that branch out. Wherever it goes, it erases evidence. Old bruises, spider veins, sun freckles. The story of my body written in pigment and scar tissue gets edited mid-sentence. How far can it go? I ask. Before I'm not me. That's not for me to answer, he says. I will say this. Whatever it takes, it doesn't give back. You can fill in blanks with guesses. You can make up new stories to cover holes. But the original is gone. Forever. The thing reaches my knee. Pain flares, not where it is, but around it. The untouched skin feels hot, oversensitized as if trying to compensate. My muscles twitch. My calf cramps. I can't stop the sound that comes out of my mouth. It's not a scream, not really. More of a drawn-out groan forced through clenched teeth. Outside, the sub presses close enough that the dome warps its silhouette. For a heartbeat, I could swear I see eyes in that blackness, reflections of my own panic refracted back at me. You can still pull the plug, Moran says quietly. Undog the hatch. Take your chances with the water, with the swim, with the harbor. Maybe it decides it's done here and follows the stains you leave behind. Maybe it doesn't. We both know that's bullshit. Once you're on its list, you don't get to just clock out. The ring reaches the top of my thigh. My leg below it looks wrong. Not alien, not monstrous, just incomplete, like a rendering that hasn't had the texture map applied yet. I wonder what my blood looks like to it. If it sees platelets and cells as filth to be scrubbed, or as the clean base layer everything else clings to. Why are you still on the radio? I ask. Why aren't you calling someone? Coast Guard, Navy, whoever built this thing. You think they don't know? He asks. You think I'm a first voice to tell them there's something in their precious bay that cleans too well? They wrote the protocols. They wrote Rule 4. They know. They just don't care enough to weigh one night operator against a harbor that never needs dredging. Bitterness curdles in my stomach. So I'm a goddamn filter, I say. Something they expect to change out now and then. Every system's got consumables, Moran says matter of fact. We just got unlucky enough to be one. The thing slows as it reaches my hip, as if considering its next move. Above that is my core. Organs. Spine. Heart. Below, it's already erased so much surface that my own leg looks unfamiliar. It could stop now. It won't. I don't, my voice breaks. I swallow, try again. I don't know how to do this. Nobody does, he says. You're the first poor bastard to actually talk to me through it. The others that either ran or froze. You're already ahead. There's a perverse kind of comfort in that. Useless but real. Stay with me, I say. Just keep talking, even if I stop making sense. He sighs. You ever notice how the water out here smells different at 4 in the morning? He asks suddenly. I blink. What? Middle of the day, you got diesel and fish and hot metal, he says. Sun baking everything. But around 4, just before dawn, there's this minute where the wind shifts and you can smell what's under all that. Old water, rock, things that have been down there longer than this port's existed. Like the sea takes a breath and lets you in on the joke for a second. As he talks, I focus on his words instead of the sensation. The ring creeps up, slow, relentless. My ribs twinge. I try to remember the smell he's describing. Nights standing on docks, air tasting like salt and rust and something vast. That moment just before the sky lightens, where the whole world feels like it's hovering on the edge of something. The droplet reaches my pelvis. For a second, my vision whites out. Not from pain, from static. My memories stutter. I remember getting hired here. Moran's wheezing laugh. The laminated rules. I remember the sub last night, dragging its limbs along the bay. I remember my first time on a boat, a little aluminum skiff on a lake when I was 6, my uncle's hand heavy on the back of my life jacket. That one glitches. It's there, then not. The smell of fresh water, the slosh of the wake, my uncle's laugh. They all smear like paint and then snap back. I feel my heart pounding, my lungs dragging air. There's things in the deep that don't care if we believe in them, Moran says. We build stations and docks and rigs on top of them like scaffolding on a whale. Sometimes the whale moves. That's all this is. What a fucking metaphor, I mutter weakly. He chuckles, and the sound is shaky. You're still you, he says. As long as you can complain, you're still you. For now. The ring slips across my lower belly. For the first time, it hurts. Maybe because there's more nerve endings there. Maybe because it's closer to something vital. It feels like being flayed with ice. Not hot knives, cold ones. Peeling away layers so cleanly there's no blood, just exposure. I can't hold back the scream this time. It tears out of my throat, ragged, filling the bubble, bouncing off the dome, mixing with the distant scrape and the tick of invisible bristles. Outside, the sub shudders, almost imperceptibly, like something inside it tensed in response. My scream cuts off on its own, throat raw. I taste iron. I wonder, distantly, if it'll clean my voice right out of me. If I'll end up like Moran, gravelly and chewed up, always one word away from coughing. Still there, he asks. I nod, then realize he can't see. Yeah, I croak. What's it like, he asks. I laugh, hysterical and breathless. Like getting erased with intention, I say. Like having someone go through your story with whiteout and decide which lines they don't like. The droplet splits again. Half continues upward over my sternum. The other half traces along my side, following a faint white line from where I once cracked a rib falling on a wet deck. Wherever it goes, scars vanish. I don't know whether to be grateful or terrified. My mind flickers. I remember my mother's face. The way her hair smelled like cigarettes and shampoo. The way she yelled the first time she caught me sneaking down to the pier at midnight. Then, for a second, I don't. She's a shape with no features. A blank in my story. The emotional weight is still there, a hollow ache, but there's nothing to hang it on. It's like missing a tooth you're sure used to be in your mouth, but you can't remember which one. Then it snaps back, blurry around the edges. I clutch at it mentally, as if that does anything. I don't think it's just dirt, I whisper. I think it's anything that's stuck, anything that's built up, good or bad. Yeah, Moran says quietly. That tracks. He doesn't sound surprised. Of course he doesn't. This is routine to him. A horror he's lived with long enough to wrap bureaucracy around. You could come out here, I say suddenly. You could take a boat. You could get me, drag me off this thing before it finishes. And take you where? He asks. Onto a nice, grubby wooden dock? Into some ambulance with cloth seats? Into a hospital full of plastic and fabric and far too much history? You think this thing won't follow the smear you trail behind? I see it instantly. The droplet on my leg, leaving clean, perfect circles on every surface I touch as I'm carried. A slow-moving contamination. The sub sliding under the harbor, bristles already twitching, gearing up to clean the entire city down to bone and bedrock. Isvalobile. No, I say. No, he agrees. Best thing you can do for the rest of us is sit your ass on that chair and let it finish its goddamn job. The worst part is that he's probably right. It keeps moving, up across my chest, over my shoulders, down one arm, sparing the veins but not the scars. My old tattoo, a shitty anchor I got when I was 17 and drunk in a port town where the artist had shaky hands, fades under it. ink dissolving out of my skin like smoke. I watch the lines unravel, the black turn gray, then nothing. I don't remember getting it for a second. Then the memory flickers back, out of order, like the events happened to someone else, and I'm reading them off a page. My head swims. Thoughts slip. Names blur. The sub outside feels closer than my own heartbeat. You still with me? Moran asks again. Yeah, I say, though I'm not entirely sure what that means now. Yeah, I'm here. The droplet reaches my collarbone. For a moment, it pauses at the hollow of my throat, like it's considering whether to keep going or call the job done. I'm suddenly aware of every breath scraping past it. If it takes my throat, my voice goes with it. If it takes my head, hey, I say quickly before it decides anything. Moran, yeah. Why do you keep working here? I ask, if this is what you sign people up for. If this is what you risk every time that thing shows up. He's quiet for a long moment. Then he says, because the water will always be there, with or without us. We build our bullshit on top of it and pretend we've tamed it. But it swallows ships and people and cities just the same. This thing, whatever it is, it's just one more part of that. One more process. You don't get mad at the tide for coming in. You learn where the high water mark is and you live above it. Poetic, I say. It comes out a rasp. Also, he adds dryly, because I'm an old bastard with no other prospects and a pension tied to this place. Don't give me too much credit. I'll laugh, even as the droplet tips over the edge of my collarbone and begins to climb the side of my neck. It feels like ice fingers tracing my pulse. My vision tunnels. The bubble around me blurs at the edges. The monitors smear. The sonar ping stretches out into a long, low tone. Memories spin. A dock, a lake, my mother screaming, Moran's wheezing laugh, the laminated rules, the first time I smelled the ocean, the taste of salt on someone's lips, the feel of a boat rolling under my feet in a storm, the black hole in the bay, the red smear on my pants. Some of them stutter and skip. Some go mute entirely. Every time the droplet moves, something else fuzzes at the edges. I squeeze my eyes shut. Kid. Moran's voice says, distant, crackling. I'm here. I whisper. There's a soft sound. Not scrape. Not tick. Just a little tap. Like knuckles on glass. I open my eyes. The sub's bristled limb, one of the smaller ones, finer than the monsters that raked the bay, has emerged fully now, pressed gently against the outside of the dome at eye level. Through it, through the glass, through the slightly warped water, I see my own reflection. For a second, I don't recognize the face. It's me, but wrong. Some scars are gone. Some lines deeper. My hair looks like it did 3 years ago. My eyes look like they did when I was 10. It's like someone took a dozen versions of my face from different times and stacked them together, half transparent. I reach up, slowly, hand shaking, and press my palm to the glass opposite that limb. We don't touch. There's inches of acrylic and water and something else between us. But it feels like contact anyway. The droplet reaches my jawline. For a heartbeat, the world blinks. When it comes back, there's a gap where my father's name should be. I know I had one. I can't pull into focus. It's like chasing a fish through murky water. You see the flash, then nothing. Still with me? Moran says again. His voice sounds older now. Or maybe I just can't remember what it sounded like before. I let my head rest against the dome. The acrylic is cool against my cheek. The ocean presses on the other side, patient and immeasurable. I think so, I say. For now, the droplet pauses at my temple. Maybe that's where the mark ends. Maybe it's run out of rash to follow. Maybe it's deciding whether the dirt it cares about is gone. I breathe, slow, counting. 1, 2, 3. Outside, the limb withdraws an inch. The scraping along the hull quiets. The sub shifts a subtle adjustment. The droplet contracts, and then it slides back down, away from my skull, down my neck, retracing its path in reverse. It doesn't bring anything back. The blank skin stays blank. The erased scars stay gone. The holes in my memory don't refill. It just returns to where it started. to the little crescent of flesh above my ankle that is no longer red, no longer hot, no longer marked. It pools there, shines, then sinks, not into the metal, into me. For an instant, I feel it inside, not like a foreign body, not a lump or a pressure, more like a taste at the back of my throat, metallic and clean, like licking a new battery and a fresh knife at the same time. Then even that fades. The rash is gone. The skin is smooth. My leg feels like it belongs to me again, mostly. Outside, the sub backs away from the station. Slow, unhurried. It drifts out to the edge of the floodlight halo, pauses, then slides into the black beyond like it was never there. The sonar pings. Empty water. The scrape stops. The only sounds left of the station zone. Pumps, fans, the faint drip of honest condensation. My head hurts. My chest feels hollow. I sit there, curled in the chair, staring at nothing, until the faint gray of dawn starts to seep down from the surface, tinting the water just beyond the windows. The radio hisses. "You still there?" Moran asks again. "Yeah," I say. It comes out flat. "Status?" he asks. I look down at my leg, touch the blank skin, run my fingers over my arm where the tattoo used to be. Try to summon the exact shade of the ink, the name of the friend who was with me, the song that was playing in the bar after. Beats me. Bits don't. I'm mostly here, I settle on. That's why we get hazard pay, he says. It's an attempt at a joke. It falls flat. I laugh anyway. It's a brittle sound. Anything in the bay? He asks. I flip through the camera feeds. The tunnel is spotless. Still, the transfer compartment is empty. The rails shine. No, I say. It did what it came to do. Bay's clean. I'm cleaner. How bad? He asks. Some scars gone, I say. Some memories fuzzy. Can you still work? He asks. The question snaps my head up. You're fucking kidding, I say. You want me to just keep running cycles? Like this. I want to know if you'll climb down from that bubble without falling on your face, he says. Then we'll talk about the rest. I stand. My legs tremble. The deck under my bare foot feels strangely new, like I've never stepped on metal before. My sense of balance is off by half an inch. I take one step, then another. I don't fall. Yeah, I say. I can walk. Good, he says. Day crew will be out in an hour. You can brief me proper then. For now, sit. Breathe. Don't go near the bay. Don't touch anything you don't have to. You and that bubble are a closed system until I say otherwise. Understood. Yeah, I say again. I look out through the dome at the empty water. There's nothing there. Just a reflection of my own face and the faint, lazy swirl of plankton in the morning light. I can't remember my father's face. I can remember the exact sound of that scraping, the way it vibrated up through my bones. I can't remember the name of the lake I first learned to swim in. I can remember, with perfect clarity, the feeling of being cleaned from inside out by something that doesn't understand the difference between rust and regret. I sit back down. The chair creaks. The dome drips. Somewhere above, the harbor wakes up. Engines starting, gulls screaming, city humming. Down here, it's just me. Me, the silent bay, and the knowledge that somewhere in the deep, there's a black hull drifting, carrying around 5 bristled limbs and a hunger for every stain we leave on the world. I don't know how long I'll keep this job. I don't know how much more of me it will take next time it decides the bay isn't up to standard. I don't know this. It's 4:12 a.m. The water outside looks calm, and I can't shake the feeling that, even after it's gone, something is still scraping at the edges of me. Slow, patient, meticulous.